United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
City of Romulus City Council regular meeting for Monday, July 1st, 2019. We're going to take roll call vote right now. And Councilwoman Abdo,
She's excused.
Councilman Barden,
He's here.
Councilwoman Roscoe. Here. Councilwoman Talley,
Here.
Councilman Wadsworth, Councilwoman Webb,
Here.
Councilwoman Williams.
Excused, I guess.
We do have a quorum this evening. And number one is the agenda. We have an amended agenda this evening. We added 5C to it. And number two is minutes, 3 petitioner, 4 chairperson's report, 5 mayor's report, 6A clerk's report, 6B treasurer's report, 7 public comment, 8 unfinished business, 9 new business, 10 communication, and 11 is adjournment. And a motion would be in order to accept the amended agenda.
So moved to accept the amended agenda that's submitted.
Support.
It's been motioned by Ms. Talley, supported by Ms. Roscoe for approval of the minute agenda. Ms. Talley?
Yes.
Ms. Roscoe?
Yes.
Mr. Wadsworth?
Yes.
Ms. Webb?
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Motion approved.
2A is approval of the minutes from the regular council meeting held Monday, June 24th, 2019.
Mr. Chair, I'll make that motion to approve the minutes from the regular council meeting held Monday, June 24th, 2019.
Support.
Been motioned by Ms. Roscoe, supported by Ms. Webb, for approval of the minutes from the regular council meeting, which was held Monday, June 24th, 2019. Ms. Roscoe?
Yes.
Ms. Webb?
Yes.
Mr. Wadsworth?
Abstain.
Ms. Talley?
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Motion approved.
2B is approval of the minutes from the special meeting of June 24th, 2019. It was an open session, and the discussion was proposed changes, corrections to the Romulus Memorial Cemetery rules and regulations.
Mr. Chair, I'll make that motion for approval of the minutes from the special meeting of June 24th, 2019. What was the open session? Proposed changes, corrections to the Romulus Memorial Cemetery rules and regulations.
Support.
It's been motioned by Ms. Roscoe, supported by Ms. Talley, for approval of minutes from the special meeting of June 24th, 2019, which was open session, proposed changes, corrections to the Romulus Memorial Cemetery rules and regulations. Ms. Roscoe?
Yes.
Ms. Talley?
Yes.
Mr. Wadsworth?
Abstain.
Ms. Webb?
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Motion approved.
3A is petitioner, and this is for RZ-2019-001 and SLU 2019-002. Precision Vehicle Storage Conditional Rezoning for Zoning Map Amendment, Conditional Zoning Agreement, and Special Land Use for 37685 Van Born Road. And we have Mr. Alan Green here this evening from Dykema Gossett.
Good evening. My name's Alan Green. My address is 39577 North Woodward Avenue, Suite 300, Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. With me also is Ben Griffin, who is very knowledgeable about the operational requirements of the facility we're proposing in case you have any questions. I will be relatively brief, and if you want more information, I could give that to you. What we're proposing here is a conditional rezoning from M2 to MT to allow a new vehicle staging and production operation. The property is approximately 35 acres south of Van Born Road, really directly across the street from the Ford manufacturing plant. And we've owned the property about 20 years or so, along with a much larger holding of property in the area, and have been marketing it and other properties for industrial development for some time. The ProTrans facility that's under construction right across there is on property that was part of this property in which we were involved in. We tried to get ProTrans to, acquire this property as well, because it was all part of the same parcel. And they had an option on it. We thought it'd be a great place for them to expand if they needed to in the future, but that hasn't worked out. The property is very unique in many respects. It's got 35 acres, but only 20 acres of it are really developable. The first quarter of a mile off of Van Born Road would be wooded wetlands, and you really don't want to touch that. So the usable property is extremely well screened from the road. It's surrounded entirely by other industrial uses and property zoned for industrial uses. And it really wraps around and goes behind the ProTrans facility, which is under construction. I put the site plan up there on the board, if you wanted to see that. And the next one, if you want to go to the next slide. We did it old school, separate slides. That's sort of an overlay of the property, showing the wooded areas. And so you can see how far back, you have about a quarter of a mile before you actually get to the area that we're going to be parking vehicles. So the conditional rezoning is because your ordinance only allows vehicle storage and parking on an empty property. And the conditions we have is this will be the only MT use allowed on this property. No other MT use will be allowed, no airport parking, no other kind of, what I call non-business parking use other than this particular facility. So it's part of the manufacturing supply chain that starts with the auto plant across the street, and I'll explain how that's all going to work on this facility in a second, but it goes from the auto plant across the street to facilities like this, then it goes back to the auto plant, then to be sent to car dealerships around the country. It's sort of interesting in your ordinance, and you guys know all this, is that a manufacturing plant would be an appropriate M2 use. The actual new car dealership with the storage of new vehicles for the dealership is allowed in the M2 uses, as well as things like car rental agencies, which also allowed in the M2 use. But this particular use isn't. And it's much closer to the MT uses than, much closer to the M2 uses than the MT uses, because we're talking about a group of cars that are owned by a single owner, just like a car dealership or a rental agency, as opposed to an airport parking facility where individual owners come in, they leave their car and take it out for a day. So the operation is proposed to come, the cars are going to come from the Ford plant across the street. We have an arrangement with them. I could show you, and that'd be the next slide. And Ben could talk about it. That's it. It would be the traffic route where the cars are going to come. So it's an ideal use as part of the manufacturing chain. What's going to happen, these vehicles are going to come to this facility, and they're going to be stored there. There's certain other things that they'll be dealt with and cared for, and then they'll go back to the Ford facility when the trains are ready to ship them to other parts of the country. There's not enough land available on the Ford facility to store all the vehicles. It's a fairly low intense use in that the traffic that's generated by the use would be significantly less than the traffic generated by any typical M2 use. The cars, they stay there, for lengthy periods of time. Usually, I don't know, sometimes it could be months. And they are removed probably 50 cars a day. That's the general traffic. And typically on a normal day, there'll be one, tractor trailer, because virtually all the cars are driven back and forth. So by having the proximity to the manufacturing facility, we save gas, we save pollution, more traffic on the roads, things like that. And the things that make this property not ideal for an M2 use, a traditional M2 use, the fact that there's very little of the overall property is really developable. There's no visibility from a main road in terms of anything, signage or looking at your facility for a quarter of a mile, so it's very isolated. There's a lot of other M2 properties in the vicinity, so this would not be the first property that would be used if there was a demand. And again, we've been marketing it for 20 years. But those things that make it less desirable for a typical M2 use make it greatly desirable for this. The isolation is perfect. We want isolation for security purposes. This facility will be fenced in and monitored with live bodies 24 hours a day. And it also fits in with exactly what your ordinance wants, in that you don't want a parking facility of any type to be visible. I think your ordinance says you want to completely screen. So we have a substantial buffer. We're maintaining also not only that initial 1,400 feet from the road, but there's going to be a continuous screen of vegetation that's going to be maintained between the property and other uses. And the other ideal thing about what our proposal is as a conditional rezoning is that we're still maintaining, obviously, the right to use it for other M2 uses. This doesn't have to be a permanent use. Everything that we're doing to this facility can be used and benefit another use in the future. So we're going to be looping the water and doing the utilities. We're going to be putting in storm drainage system for this. We're going to be putting in the, say, entrance road. We're actually coming in off the ProTrans Drive. It's a joint use, but we will be putting in the drive going back to the rear there. All that could be used for any future use. The only thing that would have to be removed is the asphalt paving, which is really easy to do. So someday in the future, as the M2 uses in the area start to fill up, you still have a lot of vacant available property there. This property, could be converted to that use very easily. So in that regard, we think it's an ideal use for the property, at least for this time period. It doesn't create a lot of jobs. I think it was 20 jobs, but it does create an investment. It does create jobs. It creates tax base at this point with minimal services required by the community, and then it can be converted in the future to a more valuable, I shouldn't say, this is very valuable to us, but a more intense M2 use on the property. So I have photos, I don't know if you want to see it, that sort of just show the ProTrans under construction and the wooded area. If you'd like, I could show you. You're probably all familiar with the. Yes, no?
Mr. Wadsworth?
I have a quick question. How will the vehicles be transported? Driven
Driven,
across the road?
predominantly driven. It's not across the road. Ben, why don't you come in and describe where they gotta go?
What they'll do is they'll have
We
drivers.
gotta,
I'm sorry, they're new finished vehicles, brand new off the line. The drivers will drive them down Michigan Avenue, do the U-turn down Hannon to Van Bornen in, and then the drivers will be taken back to the plant in a transit van, and then they'll bring the vehicles that way. So it's
Okay.
sort of a continuous.
And then the vehicles go back across the road to be put on a train?
Then when they go back, they'll go back the same route to the plant, to the rail yard, and be loaded at the plant to be taken.
We're not talking about the rail yard down in New Boston, are we? No, okay, fine, thank you.
I can actually show you. There's, most will be shipped from.
Right, I understand, sir. I understand.
that's all I have unless you have any questions.
Any other questions from council?
I got a
Ms.
question.
Talley?
A couple of quick questions. To piggyback off of Mr. Wadsworth, all these cars that's going to be transported, because that's that turn you're talking about, they all have to U-turn, come back Michigan to Hannon. How many cars we talking at one time?
We were looking at 50 vehicle trips per day on average, and then once a year, typically, sometimes twice a year, at the most, which has rarely happened, in a new vehicle launch, there will be more trips for about a 4 to 6 weeks, 6-week period where they get the new vehicles off. And that means a brand new vehicle launch, something like that, that happens once a year. And that would be about, I think we said 400 trips.
They all at one time?
No.
Oh, okay, just continuously out throughout the day.
Right, and those trips, the advantage of that is that those trips, actually, when you compare that to a warehouse distribution facility, which is allowed on this, are actually far less. And they're not rush hour trips. They're scattered throughout the day, so they would have less impact during the worst times.
And then my other question is, I read a lot through this packet about temporary. So how long do you think this is going to be here? Because as I'm looking through this temporary, there's a lot of things that still need to be done. The recommendations from the Planning Commission, from the MKSK, from GMH, from the attorneys, from OHM, a lot of stuff that looks like to me, maybe not a lot to y'all, but when I look at it, I'm like, ooh, this is a lot. But maybe it's not. So, and I keep saying temporary. How long is we talking about being on this property?
It could be 10 years, it could, I don't know.
You know what,
Well, you're the expert on this.
completely, to be honest, so is with all the automobile manufacturers now, whether it's GM, because we do work for GM and Ford and Chrysler, what they're all having a problem with is rail car shortages. There's not enough rail cars to load these cars to be shipped. And until that problem's solved, all these manufacturers are going off-site. And that could be in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. And think, knowing the railroads, I would lean towards the 10-year. But I don't, nobody knows for sure how long this will take to get
Okay.
fixed.
And you said how long they could typically be housed there on the site?
What'll happen is when the cars get there, they'll typically sit there for 30 days or less, and then be moved off-site.
Okay, thank you.
John,
And- yeah,
I have one
Mr.
more
Wadsworth?
question. Is Ford Motor Company gonna own the property, or the ones that you represent are owning the property?
Yeah, they own the property. The ones I represent have owned the property and will continue
fine.
to own the
Thank you.
property.
Any other question from council?
Through the chair, if I may.
Yes, Ms. Webb.
Single ownership. Would you explain that to me? You said a single ownership. I guess my mind went to people ordering vehicles and having them shipped to their homes in different states.
Well, they're not owned. What I meant single ownership is when these vehicles are on our property, they're owned by Ford Motor
A
Company.
Ford Motor Company.
Not the individuals. or
Okay.
anything.
And also, will there be just cars or SUVs, or will there be those F-150s? All of Ford Motor Company's products, correct?
I believe all of their products.
Okay, that's,
Very rarely will we have a Dearborn product F-150 there. It'll be mostly Broncos and Rangers.
great.
90%,
I'm looking for a Bronco.
99%. They're all looking to see what it's gonna look like.
No, I have a son and a daughter employed by Ford Motor Company. And also with the, I understand my colleague's concern, but when you see these vehicles moving, they don't run red lights. You know, they are usually just in a line, obeying the laws, and take off. But there is one question that I have. I'm concerned, and the mayor or either Carol could probably answer this. They will be leaving the Ford Assembly Plant to Hannon to Van Born. Now they will make a right on to Wayne. Is that or
Take Van Born to the entrance of this facility
to
and
the
turn right.
entrance?
Yes.
Okay, because my concern was, you know, the heavy traffic and which way were you going to get into your facility?
And we have a traffic light right there where you enter
Okay,
this property.
thank you so much.
Ms. Roscoe?
So, from what I remember, most all your vehicles are gonna come from the Michigan assembly plant around, and there was a reason why, because we thought at first you'd just come back through the backside, and there's a reason you can't, that you have to go around. If you'd like to explain that, because that would make more sense as to why aren't we just cutting across the street?
When Ford did the expansion south of the railroad would not allow Ford to cross the railroad tracks. So the only things you see crossing the railroad tracks are elevated for parts to come across an assembly line coming across. There's no actual crossing of the railroad at the Ford assembly plant. So they have to come around.
Thank you.
Do you represent the big three?
We do all the off-site storage handle all the outside storage for needs for Ford in North America other than Mexico. So that we're representing Ford here on this.
All right.
Mr.
Yes. Ms. Talley?
So these recommendations made by these different entities, how long do you think it would typically take to address all these recommendations from all these different entities?
It would be very quick. So what it is we've given you a concept plan, and we're dealing with the zoning issues. We then have to go back to the planning commission with a formal site plan. So that's when we do the engineering details. And what the agencies were telling us, when you come back, here are things we want you to look at or address. And so we're prepared. We've looked at all that, and what we told the planning commission was that there's nothing we disagree with, and we'll be able to address all the issues raised, by the consultants and what they wanted to see in the plans. So they made certain recommendations that we agreed to.
So if everything went through here and then you take it back to the planning commission and everything goes good, well, when do you think you will start work and getting that project going? Just ballpark.
When do you think, what's the projection under date? Assuming we,
To be completely honest, again, we have a meeting tomorrow at 12:30, and I might have a better idea then.
Okay.
But they're aware that we're going through this process.
Okay. Thank you.
Through the chair, if I may.
Yes, Ms. Webb?
yes.
Thank you, gentlemen. Carol, may I ask you a question, please?
Excuse me.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were just gonna do it.
No, we have to talk into the microphone so it gets picked up on the record.
Okay, so you want us to vote on this evening?
Yes, and actually, thank you for clarifying. On page 3 of my report, what we're looking for tonight is first reading on the conditional rezoning, which is also approval of the agreement. So that will come back again for a second reading next time. But tonight, you can go ahead and approve the special land use. That just requires just one approval. So we packaged it so you could do it in one motion to approve the first reading of the conditional rezoning and associated agreement, along with the special land use, and then next time come back for the second reading.
Okay, that's what I wanted to
Good
know,
question.
because since there was the recommendation given to us, but yet and still, when my colleague brought up all of the temporaries, it's like I'm not comfortable voting for something that has not actually.
The temporariness, and correct me if I'm wrong, is the fact that the cars are there for up to 30 days temporarily, and then they leave. Then another round of cars come in and leave. So it's an ever-changing, the cars aren't all the same, and there could be times when there's nothing there, or very few, and then other times when there's more. So I think that's what you were meaning. that-
Okay, I got a question. So, because that's not what I was thinking when I saw temporary. That's what we're talking about when we saying temporary? Let's clarify temporary and what we're talking about.
I guess the term temporary could be used two ways in this project. Just as Carol mentioned, that the cars are there on a temporary basis, but the other thing is that as a land use,
Right.
it doesn't have to be a permanent land use. In other words, we're not building a building that now you're limiting what you could do with it. The property can be used in the future
Right.
for to distribution building, or maybe ProTrans in the future comes to us and says, hey, we'd really like to expand. We're really can't talk anymore. Successful here. That's what you mean by temporary.
Okay.
I mean it's not like for the life of the land. Okay.
That, though, would come back to you. That
Right.
would be an amendment to the conditional rezoning and the agreement.
Okay.
So that would go back through the same process.
Thank you.
So you would see it, the planning commission would see it.
Okay, thank you.
Good question.
Yes, Bill?
Is there gonna be a building put up for the employees that are checking cars, or I mean, you can't stand out there in the wintertime or nothing.
I know what there is a structure.
A structure,
There will be an office, probably an office facility, and maybe a minor maintenance facility there, some sort of maintenance, but we're not sure yet. We'll obviously cover that with Carol in site plan, but there will be a structure there.
Fine, thank you.
Any other questions from council?
Through the chair, if all my colleagues have finished their questioning, I'd like to make that motion, if I may, if I can get support
Support.
for the conditional rezoning and conditional zoning agreement and special land use for 37685 Van Born Road.
It's been motioned by Ms. Webb, supported by Ms. Roscoe for the RZ 2019-001 and the SLU 2019-002 vehicle storage condition rezoning, conditional rezoning agreement and special land use for 37685 Van Born Road. Ms. Webb,
Yes.
Ms. Roscoe,
Yes.
Mr. Wadsworth,
Yes.
Ms. Talley.
Yes.
Chair votes yes, motion approved.
John,
Yes.
I have a question to the mayor. On the second part of this, I see a lot happening in downtown. How does this benefit the downtown?
We're gonna cover that
Gonna
actually
cover that?
under, yes, it's under, 6A3, I think.
Thank you.
Yep. Brad Stradro.
Okay, number 4 is the chairperson's report.
There wasn't any special meetings tonight in council. The chairperson has no report tonight.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to accept your no report tonight.
Support.
It's been motioned by Ms. Roscoe, supported by Ms. Talley, to accept the chairperson's report. Ms. Roscoe?
Yes.
Ms. Talley?
Yes.
Ms. Webb?
Yes.
Mr. Wadsworth?
Yes.
Chair votes yes, motion approved. Thank you. Thank you.
5 is the mayor's report.
Good evening, City Council, Deputy Clerk, and audience. First, no quote, I just want to say happy 4th of July. It's coming up this week. Big date for our whole country. Reminder that the offices will be closed on the 4th, that Thursday. We don't have a video tonight. What I did want to talk about briefly is we did have on the 27th of June our traditional fireworks celebration, which, and I know council knows this and the people at home don't, we have a pretty detailed incident action plan that's put together with police, fire, all who are involved in that. And I'm not going to go through, obviously, all of that. Some of you may have caught some press either in the news media or social media about the event. And I guess from my perspective, the thing that I would like to say is that, you know, we do these fireworks. We actually get corporate sponsors to pay the cost of the fireworks, as council knows. There's obviously public safety, DPW involved to try to keep everybody safe while these events are going on. It's typical that we always do have some incidents that come up, and I guess what I want to say about this year's firework, the show was great. We had a lot of support from a lot of agencies. With this incident action plan, we did pull on some community partner neighbors, and there was some behavior that to me is unacceptable in our community, and they're just flat out unacceptable. We have these fireworks to allow families and individuals and youth to celebrate the 4th of July. The reason we do them on the 27th is because we actually get a better price on the fireworks show doing it earlier rather than on the actual 4th, which some communities do. So we coordinate this, very detailed plan. We'll be doing a debrief on it, but what I wanted to do is maybe, if I could, have J.D. Settles, our chief of police, come up and just make a couple comments about where we go from here. We're going to be reviewing and debriefing the information, the data, before we come back with a recommendation next year. Next year, as you know, it's problematic because we have some major road construction going on Wick Road. The Great Lakes Water Authority, as you know, is putting a redundant water line on. So it's going to make it more complicated. So before we come back with a recommendation, we're going to do a deep dive into the debriefing of what worked, what we could do better. But I want to thank our police officers, our firefighters, our DPW, our community partners that responded just terrifically to support us. And we're part of the Western Wayne, but also downriver, and we had people pulling in to help us, and that's exactly what you need and want from good, solid community partners. So with that, JD, can you say a few words, please, about
Sure.
the event? Council did get a memo
Yeah,
also
and
on that, but
I don't know if you guys read the memo, but I think it was pretty much cut and dry that there were no injuries, no property damage. There were about 12 arrests, 4 people from Van Buren, 4 from, I can't remember the other community, but 1 from Inkster, 1 from Detroit. Like I said, no officers was injured. We got a lot of support from the agencies that we partnered with, and I really want to talk a little bit about that. About 4 years ago, myself and executive staff, we sat down and looked at what type of critical incidents or threats that the city of Romulus would face. Civil unrest, barricaded gunmen. At that point, we start putting things into place so we could deal with those issues. One of them was joining the Western Wayne County Special Operations Consortium. I don't know if you guys remember this, but about 2 years ago, you guys voted to pass the memorandum of understanding so that we could join that organization. By you approving that, that allowed us to draw on all those additional officers from those different communities. Van Buren, Huron, Plymouth Township, Dearborn Heights, Livonia, Canton, and about a half a dozen others. Airport. So I thank you for that, because that really came in handy Thursday night. We had a tremendous amount of support from the Wayne County Sheriff Department. We probably had about 20 officers from that department, including reserves. They did an outstanding job. The officers did an outstanding job. They showed tremendous restraint in dealing with those juveniles. I don't know if you guys have had any run-ins with any juveniles lately, but they can be very difficult individuals to deal with. None was injured. Like I said, there was no property damage. And that's about it, unless you guys have some questions.
Yeah, JD, I'd just like to say I think y'all did a tremendous job.
Thank you.
And I know a lot of people have commented on how great job the police department did in Romulus and the surrounding communities. So again, great job,
Yeah,
department.
thank you, sir.
John, just
Yes.
a quick comment also, Chief, great job. But Mayor, how are we gonna do this next year with Wick Road tore up?
yeah, so I'm not sure if we will do it next
Oh,
year.
okay.
We're looking at that right now. We may have to look at some alternative site. One thing that worked very well, where there was no incident whatsoever, was at Elmer Johnson Park. Elmer Johnson Park had no issues. There's one entrance, one exit. I don't know if we can utilize that or maybe another location, but I will get back to you on a recommendation that comes through the department. Right now, I think we might have to take a year off, because that's going to be major construction from Wayne Road all the way west, and they will have traffic one direction only. But as we saw there the other night with 2 lanes, it was problematic. And we're all responsible for is making sure that the public is safe, not just for that event, but one of the things we have to look at is the other 911 calls that come in.
Yeah.
So the city doesn't quit operating. We have an event going on, so we have extra staff, and as JD said, the community partners, but we've got to make sure for normal 911 service calls, we are adequately serving and able to get around. So I'll come back with a recommendation as we go through the department, but right now, I would not want to do it the same way we do it with limited access on Wick
And,
Road.
right now, we're beginning to start planning for future activities like this. I met with a couple residents, Franklin and Jerry Shondit, Schult? And we came up with an idea where we may do a community forum where people can come in and, voice their opinion or come up with, maybe give us some ideas on how to get better at this. So,
And my last comment, Chief, you're totally correct. Sometime arresting an adult felon is easier than dealing with 14, 15, and 16-year-old
yes,
kids.
sir.
Without a doubt.
Well, thank you, JD. I appreciate you coming up, and I wanted to let council know that you did get a written report, and we'll be working on this. We're working now for next year and the year beyond to see what works. Getting the input from the community is awesome. I think that's really important, especially from the direct residents that are impacted. I know some of the officers have been pretty open and honest about it as well, too. I sat in on the roll call on Friday afternoon with some of our officers that were there on scene, and they had some pretty good insight as well. So we'll take that all, put it together, and get back to you. But thanks to everybody who made it a success, and we do appreciate also the Koza family who helped sponsor, which is U.S. Park, Quick Park, the parking companies. They're the ones that funded the actual fireworks show. So thank you to the Koza family. What I'd like to do is move on to some of my action items, if I could, Mr. Chairman. I just have a few tonight. What you have before you on item number A is simply just a request to concur with administration, authorize a no-fee permit. That's for a road closure for the Community United Baptist Church annual picnic. It happens every year. This year it's going to be August 24th. The subject streets include the Boise Walkway, Colorado Street, from 4th to the church property line. They have a lot of people there. It's a great event, but they do need to close the street to keep everybody safe there.
So moved, Mr. Chairman, for a no-fee road closure for the Romulus Community Baptist Church on August 24th.
Support.
Been motioned by Mr. Wadsworth, supported by Ms. Roscoe, for a no-fee road closure request from the Romulus Community Baptist Church. Mr. Wadsworth?
Yes.
Ms. Roscoe?
Yes.
Ms. Talley?
Yes.
Ms. Webb?
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Motion approved.
Thank you, Council. The next action item is a request to concur with the administration and approve the reappointment of Anthony Bowers, and it would be to the Recreation Commission. His term would expire December 31st, 2022.
Mr. Chair, I'll make that motion to reappoint Anthony Bowers to the Recreation Commission with the term to expire on December 31st, 2022.
Support.
Been motioned by Ms. Roscoe, supported by Ms. Talley. This is for a Recreation Commission reappointment to Anthony Bowers, which will expire on December 31st, 2022. Ms. Roscoe?
Yes.
Ms. Talley?
Yes.
Ms. Webb?
Yes.
Mr. Wadsworth?
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Motion approved.
Thank you, Council. The last action item for me is item C. This is a recommendation that came from Kevin Lozen, our Human Resource Director, and Stephen Hitchcock, Legal Counsel. And the request is to concur with the administration and legal counsel and adopt the amended Employee Policy and Procedures Manual for policy number 36.
So moved, Mr. Chairman, for the amended employee policy 36 that deals with paid medical leave.
Support.
Been motioned by Mr. Wadsworth, supported by Ms. Roscoe, for amended employee policy number 13. Any discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote. Mr. Wadsworth?
Yes.
Ms. Roscoe?
Yes.
Ms. Talley?
Yes.
Ms. Webb?
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Motion approved.
Thank you, Council. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mayor.
6A is the clerk's report. First item is the second reading, final adoption of Budget Amendment 181928, Retiree Healthcare Fund, and that was introduced at the council meeting of June 24th.
Mr. Chair, I'll make that motion for second reading, final adoption of Budget Amendment 18/19-28 for the Retiree Healthcare Fund.
Support.
Been motioned by Ms. Roscoe, supported by Ms. Talley. Second reading, final adoption of Budget Amendment 18/19-28 for the Retiree Healthcare Fund. Ms. Roscoe?
Yes.
Ms. Talley?
Yes.
Ms. Webb?
Yes.
Mr. Wadsworth?
Yes.
Chair votes yes. Motion approved.
6A2 is PC 2019-001/002, City of Romulus Master Plan of Land Use Amendment, Downtown and Vining Road Development District. And City Planning Consultant Brad Strader will speak before council votes on this agenda item.
Good evening, Council. Brad Strader, MKSK. Carol Mays is here to assist with any questions you may have. The master plan, just as a reminder, is a guide, a document that the city updates every 5 years. That is a guide for capital improvements, expenditures, zoning, land use and so forth. And there were two sets of amendments that were done that we're going to cover tonight that have been recommended or adopted by the Planning Commission, looking for your action to adopt in the same manner as the Planning Commission. One was for the Vining Road area that we've had lots of meetings on before the zoning was changed, and the plan amendment related to Vining is just to support the zoning that you've already approved. And the second amendment is for the downtown, and that was a lot of work done. I wasn't involved in that. Carol was involved a little bit, but done by Kathleen Duffy, who used to work with me at LSL Planning, and that was through the Redevelopment Ready Community Program of the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. And they brought in their consultants, who coincidentally happened to also be consultants the city has used, so that worked out pretty well, to look at what the MEDC requires for the city to be certified as a redevelopment ready community. Found the city already meets most of the criteria for that, but they felt that there needed to be some changes to the downtown elements in the master plan, and worked with the DDA and with Mary Dreyer to come up with those changes. So I'll cover those lightly, but if you have a lot of questions on those, I might defer to Carol. Or to Mary, yes. Starting with the Vining Road development area, I know council has seen all this before, but I think for the audience, I'll try to cover it at least a little bit. So on the left is the old master plan before the Planning Commission changed it. And the whole area around Vining was regional center, regional commercial, with the idea of a wide range of uses. And Planning Commission and council agreed that we needed to, in part of that area, allow for some other types of uses as well. So research and development, certain light industrial uses. But we did make a change at council's request at a meeting we had some time ago to make sure it was very clear to people you can still do the regional center uses, that we've kept it all red instead of having, you might remember the old maps had purple and gray, and so now it's all red and striped to make it clear. We'd still like to see the uses that were allowed, but these, in certain areas, these are additional uses. So just on the map on the right, the areas that are crosshatched are areas where on the right side of the slide, some light industrial uses up to 350,000 square feet would be allowed if they meet all these new standards that are assure better quality development than we have for light industrial elsewhere in the city. And on the left side of Vining Road is a mixed-use campus that requires setbacks and amenities along the lake and only allows going up to 125,000 square feet. And then we did show, again, at Council and Planning Commission's request, where the Amazon Fulfillment Center is. We noted that as a medium industrial area, with the idea being from Amazon, as you work toward the I-94 interchange, we want to gradually reduce the intensity of uses. So that's, again, changes that were made. And this is now consistent with the zoning ordinance amendment that council already adopted. So just a little bit of background more for the audience. The area has historically been zoned regional commercial at one point. Regional center as well has been a term that's been used. And the idea is to have shopping and entertainment and a wide range of uses. But the area has stayed largely vacant for many years. So the idea is to try to be a catalyst for some of that development, to add a certain amount of additional uses related to the airport, related to Amazon, but to not allow a wider range of uses, and also to really pay attention to how many trucks and make sure that any truck traffic is primarily going down to 94, not going along E-course and through our residential areas. The goals for the sub-area, the council is well familiar with, and this was tweaked a little bit after your meeting with the Planning Commission, is to allow some additional uses to recognize the demand that we have in the city now, continue to allow the regional commercial uses, and then also to pay attention to the amount of trucks. So there are requirements. Right now the city requires traffic impact studies, but a use coming in here has to also have a truck impact study to look at how many trucks, some of the things you were just talking about with precision, how many trucks, what's their routing and so forth, to make sure that the goal and intent of the Vining Road district is met. And also to provide more employment opportunities, especially for residents of the city, and to increase the tax base. The master plan also includes language that mimics what you now have in the zoning in terms of higher quality standards for architecture, dock doors, landscaping, pathways for so sidewalks that are expanded in their width, for bicycles to also use, because this is a large area, and there's standards for streets and lighting and other site design standards that are at a higher standard of design than we have elsewhere in the city. And there are illustrations in the master plan such as this one, that shows the intent. So when a developer, property owner comes in and says, what am I allowed to do here? It's not just the uses, but to have this wider range of uses, you have to meet these new standards, and we have a series of photographs and graphics in the plan. So that's an overview of Vining Road for downtown. The idea of the downtown, the DDA development plan, was to take a look at the uses that were there before and apply these redevelopment-ready community standards, looking at the master plan, and in particular to have revised goals talking about redevelopment and walkability and the types of uses. Updated the implementation strategies, including reference to the MEDC's RRC program, and there are certain criteria or factors that the RRC has that that Smith Group added to this part of the master plan. And this is just like we did for Vining. This is the future land use map out of the current master plan on the left and the new master plan on the right. Generally, it's similar, but the DDA boundaries were revised, and we've allowed a different mixture of uses. The current master plan, or the old master plan, was a little complicated, and tried to just make it a little more streamlined without so many different categories. And again, working with Mary and the DDA and Planning Commission, I think we feel that this is a good change to the master plan, and again, will help meet the MEDC's requirements. And then in this update of the plan, the old plan had a couple of sites, like the 5 points and so forth, that had details. So working with MEDC and the city staff identified 6 sites, because one of the things the MEDC looks for is to pick sites and say, how do we make something happen on those sites that would benefit the city and the residents of Romulus. So for these 6 sites, they went through different scenarios and recommendations of how they might redevelop. And these changes are also supported in changes to the zoning ordinance. One is the Goddard townhouses, and now I'm really going beyond my knowledge. So, but the city is looking, this is a DDA-owned site, and the idea is for the city to seek a developer so they can do a request for proposal. There's a format for those that the MEDC uses to kind of put the interest out there to tell developers, we own this property, we'd like to see something happen here. Here is what we'd like to see happen, and then you can review to see who's really qualified to do it and select a developer to make that implemented. The downtown core, this is from long ago, a plan I worked on, and with a couple of you anyway. This was a graphic done by Hamilton Anderson back for the 2000 or 1999 plan, and that has been retained, but there's been some things that have been accomplished out of that plan already, so those are acknowledged in the text, and a few tweaks. So this is still shown as the old plan, but the text describes and some graphics some variations to this because that was 20 years ago. 5 points, as I mentioned, that sort of remained as sort of the vision and how infill development would happen there, but the amendment to the plan talks about, rather than just have a plan, what are some things the city can do to try to stimulate the market to have those changes happen. The former school site is also talked about for some potential infill, so there's a drawing here as a example of what could happen there with some type of residential to be complementary with the neighborhood, but to reuse that site. And that's kind of it, a quick overview of the Vining Road Master Plan Amendment and the Downtown Master Plan Amendment. Both were recommended and then adopted by the Plan Commission. And
Mr.
happy
Wadsworth?
to answer any questions you have.
More incentives put in this plan for the downtown area, such as the grocery store, the hardware building?
The redevelopment ready definitely has some incentives through MEDC. So the way it kind of works, and we have to be obviously go through the process. That's what we're doing here. But the way they kind of work is that you have initial investment put forward. Either the person has the capital or they get a bridge loan. They meet the criteria for the project. MEDC will tell you what you qualify for, and you think of it as getting your money back at the end. Is it enough? No, I'd like to see more, but they have that right now. DDA is also just looking at the facade enhancement again. They seem interested in that, where if someone owns a building and they want to bring the exterior front up or some other things that would enhance that to make it more attractive, the DDA is looking at that as well.
Okay, fine.
And one thing I don't think I
That's
explained
a
very well.
positive step.
So MEDC, the reason you're going through this process to be redevelopment ready certified is once you get through that process, then you are eligible for the MEDC funds. So one of the reasons we're doing this is to make the city eligible for those funds.
So if a developer would come in and want to take over the supermarket, I mean, everything is in place to help them.
Correct.
Okay, fine, thank you.
Any other questions from council?
If
No more
there's not, Mr. Chair, I will make a motion to accept PC 2019 001/002 for City of Romulus's master plan of land use amendment, downtown and Vining Road Development District.
Support.
It's been motioned by Ms. Roscoe, supported by Ms. Webb, for the PC 2019-001/002 City of Romulus Master Plan of Land Use Amendment, Downtown and Vining Road Development District. Ms. Roscoe,
Yes.
Ms. Webb,
Yes.
Ms. Talley,
Yes.
Mr. Wadsworth. Chair votes yes, motion approved.
6B is the treasurer's report, and there is no treasurer's report this evening. 7 is public comment, and this is the portion of the agenda for those in the audience who would like to address City Council. The rules to address City Council can be found on the back of the meeting agenda. If you would like to address City Council, please raise your hand, and after being acknowledged by the chairperson, approach the podium and state your name and address. Please note you have 3 minutes to speak, and any additional time would be upon consent of the chairperson. And we do have a written request this evening
Okay.
from Franklin and Jerry Schott. Oh, you're good? Okay,
Okay.
you're welcome.
Okay, is there any other comment from the audience? No comment from the audience? We'll close that part out.
Number 8 is unfinished business. Number 9 is new business. Number 10, communication. And number 11 is adjournment.
Support.
It's a motion by Mr. Wadsworth, supported by Ms. Webb, for adjournment. Mr. Wadsworth?
Yes.
Ms. Webb?
Yes.
Ms. Talley?
Yes.
Ms. Roscoe?
Yes.
Chair votes yes, we are adjourned. Thank you.